Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at someone you love and wondered if they were living a whole different life behind your back? Imagine this. You're 7 months pregnant, carrying the child of the man you've built your whole life around. You live in a Beverly Hills penthouse. Everything looks perfect from the outside. People see you and say, "That's what a fairy tale looks like." But deep down, something feels off. You try to ignore it, right? Because you love him, because you want to believe in the life you've built. So when he tells you he's flying to Maui for one last quiet trip before the baby comes, you kiss him goodbye. You tell yourself not to overthink. But what if I told you he wasn't alone on that plane? He wasn't thinking about your baby. He was sipping champagne with another woman, planning a future with her. Yeah, while you were carrying his child. Now let me really bring this home. What he didn't know was that, back in Los Angeles, his wife wasn't sitting around crying. No. She was sitting across from the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. And trust me, the papers were already printed. The courier was already booked. He thought he was going on a romantic escape, but he was walking straight into a trap. So if you're still here, listening, ask yourself, what would you do if the person who promised you everything gave it all to someone else? Stay with me. This story's just getting started, and if it's already tugging at something in your heart, then trust me, you're not alone. The city lights of Los Angeles glittered below the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, a sprawling universe of captured stars to Camille Devereaux Prescott. They were just part of the wallpaper of her life, a life so meticulously curated for perfection it felt at times like a museum exhibit. She was the primary installation, the beautiful, intelligent wife of Jackson Prescott, the boy wonder of the fintech world at 34. Jackson was a force of nature. He had the restless energy of a man who believed he could bend the world to his will, and the track record to prove it. His company, Orion Capital, had revolutionized algorithmic trading, making him a billionaire before his 30th birthday. He was handsome in a way that seemed almost unfair, sharp jaw, eyes the color of a stormy ocean that held a perpetual spark of ambition, and a smile that could disarm world leaders and charm seasoned investors with equal ease. They had met at a charity auction 5 years earlier. Camille, then a rising star in the art preservation world, possessing a quiet grace and a formidable intellect that Jackson found captivating. She wasn't just another socialite drawn to his flame. She challenged him, debated with him, and saw the man behind the myth. Her family, the Devereaux, were old money, steeped in tradition and a quiet, unshakable influence that made Jackson's new money flashiness seem almost crude in comparison. Their union was a merger of dynasties, a storybook romance that graced the covers of Vogue and Forbes simultaneously. Their home was a testament to their combined aesthetics. Jackson's sleek, minimalist tech seamlessly integrated with Camille's priceless collection of modern art and antique French furniture. It was a palace in the sky on the 58th floor of 1000 Beverly, a monument to their success, their power, their love. And now, at 30, Camille, 7 months pregnant with their first child, a son, was about to set the final piece of the perfect picture in place. She ran a hand over the gentle, firm swell of her belly, a protective, primal gesture that had become second nature. The baby kicked, a fluttering reminder of the new life she was nurturing. She smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that rarely made it past the fortress of her public composure. "He's active tonight," she had said an hour ago, hoping to draw Jackson away from the holographic stock ticker glowing faintly in his home office. Jackson had looked up, his focus slow to shift. "That's my boy, already planning his market takeover," he'd smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. His gaze was distant, his mind clearly still crunching numbers and closing deals a world away. This distance was a new thing, a subtle but persistent chill that had crept into their gilded cage over the past few months. At first, Camille dismissed it as stress. Orion Capital was in the middle of a massive global expansion, and Jackson was pushing himself, as always, to the brink. There were more late nights at the office, more hushed phone calls taken in rooms he'd just exited, more weekends consumed by emergency board meetings. "It's the final push, darling," he'd assured her, stroking her hair as she lay beside him in their cavernous bed. "Once the Asia deal is closed, it's just you and me. understand the little guy. I promise. Camille, wanting to believe him, had accepted it. She was the supportive wife, the anchor to his stratospheric ambition, but a thread of unease had been pulled, and now she couldn't stop it from unraveling the tapestry of their perfect life. The real shift, the one that planted a seed of cold dread in her heart, had a name: Emery Caldwell. Emery was Jackson's new protégé, a 25-year-old coding prodigy from Stanford. She was brilliant, beautiful, and possessed an ambition that mirrored Jackson's own. He spoke of her with a reverence that bordered on obsessive. "She sees the market in a way no one else does," he'd say. "She's the future of the company." Camille had met her once at a company dinner. Emery was a whirlwind of youthful energy, with wide, doe-like eyes and a cascade of jet-black hair. She hung on Jackson's every word, her hand brushing his arm a little too often, her laughter a little too loud, a little too intimate. Camille, a connoisseur of social subtleties, had recognized the performance instantly. It was the calculated, hungry ambition of a predator disguised as hero worship. She had felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. When she had gently mentioned to Jackson that Emery's professional admiration seemed to blur boundaries, he had become uncharacteristically defensive. "Don't be ridiculous, Camille," he'd snapped, his voice sharp. "You're being insecure. She's a kid. She's vital to the company. I can't have you making my top talent feel uncomfortable because you're feeling hormonal." The word hung in the air between them, ugly and dismissive. Hormonal. He had never spoken to her like that before. It was a dismissal, not just of her concern, but of her perception, of her very reality. The argument had escalated, their first real, venomous fight. They had reconciled, of course, with Jackson apologizing profusely, blaming his stress, and buying her a breathtaking diamond bracelet from Fred Leighton as a peace offering. She wore it now, its cold weight a constant, glittering reminder of that crack in their foundation. Tonight, the unease was a physical presence in the silent penthouse. Jackson was packing. He had announced it 2 days ago. "I need a break before the baby comes," he'd said, avoiding her eyes as he stared out at the city. "Just a few days to clear my head. I've booked a trip, Maui. Just me. I need to disconnect, to come back ready to be a father." Camille's heart constricted. Maui was their place. It was where he had proposed, on the pristine white sands of McKenna Cove. The thought of him there alone felt wrong, a desecration of a shared memory. "Why alone, Jackson?" she had asked, her voice quiet. "We could go together, a Babymoon. Most couples do that." "You can't fly, Camille," he'd replied quickly, a little too quickly. "Doctor's orders. It's too close to your due date. It's not safe." She knew he was right about the flying restrictions, but the excuse felt hollow, a prepackaged, convenient truth. Still, she had relented. To fight him on it would only push him further away, would only validate his accusation of her being insecure and controlling. So she had smiled, helped him choose what to pack, and pretended to be the understanding, supportive wife. Now, she stood in the doorway of their enormous walk-in closet, a space larger than most Los Angeles apartments. Jackson was carefully folding a lightweight linen shirt into his designer suitcase. He was packing for warm weather, for relaxation, for paradise. But as he reached into the back of his drawer, he palmed a small, unfamiliar box and, thinking she wasn't looking, slipped it into the side pocket of his carry-on. It wasn't a watch box or a cufflink box. It was smaller, more delicate, the size of a box for a woman's necklace, or perhaps a ring. Camille's blood ran cold. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. She said nothing. She simply watched, her mind a maelstrom of denial and terrifying certainty. He was going to Maui, their special place, but he was not going alone, and he was bringing a gift. She retreated silently from the doorway, her hand protectively on her belly. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if sensing his mother's distress. In the reflection of the vast, dark window, Camille saw herself, a woman standing on the precipice of a great fall. The glittering city lights behind her no longer looked like stars, but like the cold, indifferent eyes of a world about to watch her perfect life shatter into a million pieces. Her breath hitched in her throat, and a cold sweat began to form along her spine. Her heart was pounding, not from exertion, but from the sickening weight of realization settling in. The room, moments ago filled with warmth and polished elegance, now seemed unfamiliar. The art on the walls, the soft lighting, even the scent of fresh lilies, all of it felt like stage props in a life that was never truly hers. The gilded cage had become a trap, and she was just beginning to realize the door had been locked from the outside. The kiss Jackson gave her at the door was as fleeting as it was cold, a ghost of a touch against her cheek. "I'll call you when I land, darling," he said, the endearment sounding rehearsed. "I love you." "I love you too," Camille whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She watched the elevator doors slide shut, encasing him in polished brass, and the finality of it felt like a guillotine's drop. The silence he left behind was immense, a roaring vacuum where the hum of his presence used to be. For an hour, she did nothing. She simply stood in the grand foyer, her hand resting on a cool marble console table, her mind refusing to process the implications of the little box and the distant look in her husband's eyes. Denial was a warm, comforting blanket, and she wanted to wrap herself in it, to sleep until he came back and proved her fears were nothing more than the paranoid fantasies of a hormonal pregnant woman. But beneath that blanket, something else stirred, an old instinct honed over years of managing delicate negotiations and ruthless personalities. A whisper in her mind that said, "Trust what you saw, trust what you felt." But Camille Devereaux Prescott was not a woman who wallowed in denial for long. Her upbringing, her education, her very nature were rooted in analysis and action. She had managed art foundations, negotiated with ruthless collectors, and navigated the treacherous social waters of Los Angeles's elite. She was a strategist with a newfound, icy resolve. She walked into Jackson's home office. The room was his sanctuary, a temple of chrome and black leather. His primary desktop computer was locked, protected by a password so complex it was likely a string of code. But Jackson was a creature of habit, and in his arrogance, convenience often trumped security. His personal laptop sat on the corner of the desk, still logged in. Her hands trembled as she moved the mouse. The screen flickered to life, showing a half-finished email to his legal team about the Asia expansion. Her guilt was a sharp, stabbing pain, but her suspicion was a roaring fire that consumed it. Where to even begin? His emails, his calendar? She started with his browser history. Her eyes scanned the list, mostly financial news sites, tech blogs, and links to Orion Capital's internal servers. Then she saw it. A series of searches from the past week, all centered around Maui. Best private villas Maui. Maui chef catered meals, Maui jewelry stores, Lahaina Cartier, Trinity necklace price, and then, the one that made her breath catch in her throat, Maui Medical Clinic. Obstetrics. Obstetrics. The word pulsed on the screen. Her breath caught mid-gasp, her lungs suddenly unable to draw in air. The room tilted slightly, and her vision blurred at the edges, not from tears, but from the abrupt, brutal clarity of realization. Why would he be looking up pregnancy-related medical care in Maui? He had told her she couldn't fly. The only possible reason was that he was going with someone else who was pregnant. The pieces slammed together in her mind with brutal, sickening force. The distant behavior. The constant talk of his brilliant protégé, Emery. The late nights weren't about work. They were about her. The hushed calls weren't to his board. They were to his mistress. The little box wasn't a future surprise for Camille. It was a Cartier necklace for another woman. He had gotten her pregnant. The Babymoon he was taking wasn't to prepare for fatherhood with his wife. It was to celebrate a new family, one he was starting with his employee. Her stomach churned violently, bile rising in her throat, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she might vomit right there on the pristine hardwood floor. But she swallowed it down, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the desk. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself, a low, wounded sound escaping her lips. The betrayal was absolute, a multi-layered act of cruelty so profound it was almost elegant in its depravity. He wasn't just cheating, he was replacing her. He was taking their special place, their Babymoon, their future, and giving it to someone else. Her grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight on her chest that made it hard to breathe. Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. The life she had built, the man she loved, the future she was carrying in her womb. It was all a lie, a meticulously constructed, beautifully presented lie. And what made it worse, what carved the deepest wound, was that he had smiled at her, slept beside her, kissed her belly and whispered to their unborn child, even as he planned this betrayal. But then, through the fog of pain, a different feeling began to surface. It started as a spark in the pit of her stomach and grew into a wildfire of pure, unadulterated rage. It was the fury of a woman scorned, yes, but more than that, it was the protective rage of a mother. This man, her husband, was not just betraying her. He was betraying their unborn son. He was creating a world of chaos and deception for his child before he even took his first breath. Camille wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her expression hardening. She was not a victim to be pitied. She was a Devereaux. She was a Prescott, and she would not be erased. She returned to the laptop, her movements now precise and clinical. She needed more than just suspicion. She needed undeniable proof. She navigated to a travel folder she knew he kept. It was filled with itineraries from his past business trips. And there it was, a new file created 2 weeks ago, Maui Retreat. She clicked it open. The confirmation was for a 7-night stay at the Hale Nanea Villas, the most exclusive and private resort on the island. A place so luxurious, it made their usual 5-star haunts look common. The booking was for Villa Mail, a secluded 3-bedroom compound with a private beach, a full staff, and an infinity pool that melted into the Pacific Ocean. And then she saw the flight details. A private Gulfstream G650 chartered from a discreet aviation firm. Her eyes scanned the passenger manifest. 2 names: Jackson Prescott, Emery Caldwell. There it was, the black and white, indisputable proof. Her heart didn't break this time. It turned to stone. She saved a copy of the entire itinerary to a hidden file on a secure cloud server she had maintained since her gallery days. She photographed the screen with her phone. Evidence. She thought about what to do next. Call him? Confront him when he returned? The thought of a screaming match, of his inevitable gaslighting and false apologies, filled her with disgust. It was beneath her. It was unproductive. A messy, emotional confrontation was what he would expect. He would use her pregnancy, her hormones, against her. He would try to manage the situation, to control the narrative, just as he controlled everything else. No. She would not give him that satisfaction. She would not play his game. She would invent a new one, with new rules. Her mind went to their prenuptial agreement. At the time, it had felt like a formality, a distasteful but necessary piece of paperwork for a man of Jackson's wealth. Her own family lawyer had insisted on certain clauses Camille had barely paid attention to. She remembered one specifically, an infidelity clause. It was ironclad. In the event of proven adultery, the division of assets shifted dramatically in her favor. Her lawyer, a shrewd old man named Jonathan Whitaker, had called it the Apocalypse Clause. At the time, she had laughed. Now, it was her weapon. But Jonathan was a family friend, gentle and diplomatic. She needed more than that. She needed a warrior. Someone who would not just handle a divorce, but orchestrate a takedown. There was only one name that came to mind. A name whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence in the elite circles of Los Angeles: Evelyn Grant. Grant wasn't just a lawyer. She was a legend, a titan of matrimonial law who had dismantled the empires of some of the most powerful men in the country. She was brilliant, ruthless, and devastatingly expensive. She took on only a handful of cases a year, and she never lost. Camille stood up, her back straight, her resolve absolute. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Jackson thought he was in paradise, celebrating his new life. He had no idea. He was flying into the eye of a hurricane named Camille. She picked up her phone, not to call her husband, but to make the most important call of her life. She found the number for Evelyn Grant's private office. As the phone began to ring, she looked out the window again. The city lights no longer seemed indifferent. They seemed like an army waiting for her command. Evelyn Grant's office, a crisp voice answered. "My name is Camille Prescott," she said, her voice steady and clear, devoid of any tremble. "I need to schedule an immediate and confidential consultation with Ms. Grant. It's a matter of some urgency." The game was on. The offices of Grant & Associates were located in the Sterling Tower on Sunset Boulevard, a masterpiece of corporate modernism that projected an aura of untouchable power. The interior was surprisingly serene, decorated in muted tones of gray, cream, and slate. It was a place designed to calm frayed nerves and focus the mind on the cold, hard calculus of divorce. Camille was led into a corner office with a panoramic view of the city. Evelyn Grant rose from behind a large, imposing desk made of polished obsidian. She was a woman in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored Armani suit. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp geometric bob, and her eyes, behind a pair of severe-looking glasses, were the color of chipped ice. They missed nothing. "Mrs. Prescott," she said, her voice a low, modulated instrument of command. She didn't offer a handshake, but gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Thank you for coming in. Your call was compelling." Camille sat, placing her crocodile Hermes bag beside her. She felt a strange sense of calm in this room. With this woman, her chaotic emotions were liabilities. Only facts mattered. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, Miss Grant. Please, call me Evelyn. In my experience, urgency of this nature means the stakes are high. So tell me, Camille, why are you here?" Without preamble, Camille laid out the story. She spoke with a detached precision that belied the raw wound in her soul. She detailed Jackson's recent behavior, the discovery of his secret relationship with Emery Caldwell, the damning evidence on his laptop, the resort booking, the private jet manifest, the search history for prenatal care and Cartier necklaces. She spoke of their assets, the penthouse, the art collection, the shares in Orion Capital held in her name as part of their marital agreement. She concluded by mentioning the infidelity clause in her prenup. Throughout her account, Evelyn Grant was perfectly still. She didn't take notes. She simply listened, her icy gaze fixed on Camille's face, absorbing every detail, every nuance. Camille could feel the weight of that gaze like a scalpel, dissecting her words, slicing straight to the core of the truth. But she welcomed it. In this room, with this woman, the chaos of her world was finally being shaped into something precise and actionable. When Camille finished, a long silence stretched between them. Finally, Evelyn leaned forward slightly. "And your husband is, at this moment, at Hale Nanea Villas in Maui with his pregnant mistress." "That is correct," Camille confirmed. "He believes you are at home, awaiting his return, none the wiser." "Yes." Evelyn's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. It was not a smile of warmth, but of appreciation for a particularly interesting strategic problem. "Good," she said softly. "The element of surprise is our greatest asset. Most women in your position would have called him screaming. They would have given him time to hide assets, to create a counter-narrative, to prepare for war. You did not. That tells me you are not most women." The compliment struck a quiet chord in Camille. Not because it flattered her, but because it reminded her of who she had always been before the fog of betrayal. A tactician, a survivor. She wasn't unraveling, she was getting started. Camille felt a flicker of pride. "I have no intention of letting him control this." "Excellent," Evelyn said, her voice gaining a steely edge. "Because we are not going to file for divorce in the traditional way. A quiet filing gives him time to react, to move his money through the labyrinthine shell corporations men like your husband are so fond of. No. We are going to execute what I like to call a decapitation strike." She stood and walked to the window, her back to Camille as she surveyed the city below. "We will file a petition for dissolution of marriage with the California Superior Court first thing tomorrow morning. Simultaneously, we will file an ex parte motion for a temporary restraining order. This is key. We will ask the judge to freeze every known asset, bank accounts, brokerage accounts, credit cards, property titles, personal and corporate. We will argue that there is a significant risk of dissipation of marital assets, a fancy way of saying your billionaire husband is about to hide his money, now that he's been caught. Given that he is currently out of the country with his paramour, on whom he is clearly spending lavishly, the judge will almost certainly grant it." Camille listened, captivated by the cold, brutal efficiency of the plan. Evelyn turned back to face her. "The order, once signed by the judge, will be transmitted electronically to every financial institution. By midday tomorrow, Jackson Prescott will be a billionaire on paper, but he won't be able to buy a cup of coffee. His corporate accounts at Orion Capital will be frozen, payroll, vendor payments, everything. The company will be paralyzed. This will force him to the negotiating table immediately and on our terms." The scale of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just a divorce, it was a corporate siege. "He'll be furious," Camille breathed. "That is the point," Evelyn replied. "A furious man makes mistakes, A panicked man gives concessions. We want him shocked, stranded, and powerless. Which brings me to the delivery. She returned to her desk and fixed Camille with an intense look. We will not have a grubby process server from the city accost him. This needs to be a moment of maximum psychological impact. We will hire a high-end international courier service. A professional in a suit will arrive at his private villa in Paradise. They will hand him a package containing the summons, the divorce petition, and a copy of the judge's freezing order. He will be sunning himself with his mistress one moment, and financially castrated the next. Camille visualized the scene with a sick, triumphant clarity. Every second of his unraveling, every flicker of shock on his face was a piece of her justice being served, and she felt a cold thrill in its inevitability. A vision flashed in Camille's mind. Jackson poolside, his confident smile dissolving into disbelief and horror. The satisfaction was a dark, heavy poison. There is one more thing, Evelyn continued, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. I want you to write him a note, a short one, to be included in the package. Nothing emotional, nothing angry, just a simple, clear message that this is your decision. It's important that the final blow comes from you. The next 24 hours were a blur of focused activity. Camille worked tirelessly with Evelyn's team of forensic accountants and legal aides. She provided them with every piece of financial information she had. Account numbers, names of private bankers she'd memorized, details of their property holdings in London and the Hamptons. She proved to be a formidable resource, her mind sharp, her memory for detail exact. Her years of managing multi-million-dollar art acquisitions had made her fluent in the language of money and assets. Late nights turned into early mornings, but fatigue was a distant echo against the hum of conviction in her veins. Each ledger balanced, each file cross-referenced, was another brick in the fortress she was building around her future. As the legal machinery churned, Camille felt a profound shift within herself. The grief, while still present, was packed away in a locked room in her heart. In its place was a cold, driving purpose. She was no longer just Camille Prescott, the wife. She was a general, commanding an army, moving pieces on a chessboard of immense consequence. She did it all while fielding Jackson's daily calls from Maui. "Hello, darling," he'd said on the first call, his voice breezy and warm. "The weather is incredible. You would love it." "I wish I were there too," she'd replied, her voice a perfect imitation of wistful longing. The ease with which she lied was terrifying, a skill she hadn't known she possessed. She was a performer, just like Emery. "How are you feeling? How's the little guy?" "We're fine," she said, one hand on her belly. "Just missing you." Each lie was a small piece of her soul chipping away, but she held firm. She was protecting her son, building a firewall around their future. On the morning the papers were to be filed, Camille sat at her own desk, a delicate antique piece of furniture that stood in stark contrast to the brutal modernity of Jackson's office. She took out a sheet of her personalized cream-colored stationery. Her handwriting, usually a graceful flowing script, was now tight and controlled. Evelyn had advised her to be concise. She thought for a long time, the pen hovering over the paper. What could she say to the man who had been the love of her life and the architect of her greatest pain? In the end, she wrote only 2 sentences. 2 sentences that conveyed everything he needed to know. "Jackson, I know about Emery. I know about the baby. Enjoy Maui. Camille." She sealed the note in its matching envelope. It was the most civilized and yet the most savage thing she had ever done. Late that afternoon, Evelyn called. "The judge has signed the order," she said, a note of triumph in her voice. "The wire transfers to the banks are complete. The assets are frozen. The courier is on a flight to Kahului and will take a private charter to Wailea. He will deliver the package to Villa Mail tomorrow at noon local time." Camille hung up the phone. It was done. The storm she had gathered was about to make landfall. She walked over to the vast window and looked down at the city far below. A yellow cab, impossibly small, navigated the canyons of steel and glass. She felt a kinship with it. A small but determined entity, moving with purpose through a world of giants. Jackson had once told her that in his business, timing was everything. You had to know the exact moment to strike to ensure maximum gain. It seemed she had learned his lessons well. Tomorrow at noon, in his sun-drenched paradise, Jackson Prescott would learn that his wife was a much better student than he had ever imagined. The Pacific sun was a benevolent god, casting a brilliant, warm glow over the island of Maui. In the exclusive enclave of Hale Nanea Villas perched high on the cliffs overlooking Wailea Beach, paradise was a tangible reality. At Villa Mayo, the sound was of gentle waves kissing a private stretch of sand, the clinking of ice in crystal glasses, and the soft, satisfied laughter of its two occupants. Jackson Prescott lay on a plush white sun lounger, a picture of contented masculinity. He had shed the tension of Los Angeles like a heavy coat. His skin was bronzed, his eyes, shielded by designer sunglasses, were closed in blissful repose. Beside him, Emery Caldwell glowed. Her pregnancy, just entering its 5th month, showed as a neat, compact bump beneath her stylish bikini. Every so often she glanced at Jackson not with affection but with possession, like she had finally secured what so many others wanted. The necklace wasn't just a gift, it was a prize, a declaration. She wrapped her hand over her belly, as though she were holding proof of her triumph. She ran a hand through her dark hair, her eyes sparkling with a triumphant light as she gazed at the man beside her. "Isn't it perfect, Jules?" she murmured, leaning over to kiss his shoulder. "Just perfect, almost perfect," he said, opening his eyes and smiling at her. He reached into the beach bag beside him and pulled out a small navy blue Cartier box. "This might help," Emery gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. She opened the box to reveal the Trinity necklace, 3 intertwined bands of rose, yellow, and white gold. It was delicate, iconic, and impossibly expensive. "Oh, Jackson," she breathed, her eyes welling with tears. "It's beautiful." "A symbol," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "For us, for our new beginning, a new family." He conveniently ignored the fact that he was still married, that he had a wife 7 months pregnant with his firstborn son in Los Angeles. In this sun-drenched bubble, that life, that Camille, felt a million miles away. Here with Emery, he was reborn, unshackled from the weight of old money and tradition that Camille represented. Emery was his future, a reflection of his own voracious ambition. There was no guilt in his voice, no flicker of hesitation, only the bliss of escape, of pretending that consequences could not reach paradise. As he fastened the necklace around her neck, a man appeared at the edge of the terrace. He was dressed not in resort wear, but in a lightweight gray business suit. He held a sleek leather portfolio. He was discreet, professional, and utterly out of place. Jared, the villa's butler, followed a step behind him, looking flustered. "Mr. Prescott, my apologies. This gentleman insisted. A delivery for you." Jackson's brow furrowed in annoyance. "I'm not expecting anything." The courier stepped forward. "Mr. Jackson Prescott?" he asked, his accent vaguely European. "Yes," Jackson answered, his tone clipped. "I have an urgent personal delivery for you, from Los Angeles." He extended the thick document-sized envelope. It was heavy, official-looking. Jackson sighed, taking the package. He assumed it was from his office, some tedious document the board needed him to sign. "Fine, thank you," he said dismissively, placing it on the table beside him, intending to ignore it. "Sir," the courier said, not moving, "my instructions are to wait until you have personally opened the package and acknowledged its contents." Jackson shot him a look of pure irritation. The arrogance of it was astounding. "Instructions from whom?" "From the office of Evelyn Grant, on behalf of your wife, Mrs. Camille Prescott." The name hit Jackson like a physical blow. Evelyn Grant. He knew that name. Every billionaire in Los Angeles knew that name. It was a name synonymous with ruin. And then, "on behalf of your wife, Camille." The blood drained from his face. The air around him seemed to tighten, as if the villa itself recoiled in anticipation. For a brief moment, even the sound of the ocean felt muted, held back by the gravity of what he was about to discover. The warm, benevolent sun suddenly felt cold and menacing. Emery, sensing the drastic shift in his demeanor, sat up straight, her hand protectively on the new necklace. "Jules, what is it? Who is Evelyn Grant?" Jackson didn't answer. His hands, suddenly clumsy, fumbled with the clasp of the envelope. He tore it open, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The edges of his vision blurred. Each breath felt tighter than the last. He knew, deep down, that the illusion was over. The first document he pulled out was a summons from the Superior Court of the State of California. The bold letters at the top screamed at him, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." He stared at it, his mind refusing to comprehend the words. Divorce. Camille was divorcing him. How? How could she possibly know? He had been so careful. His mind raced, trying to find a foothold in the crumbling reality. It had to be a bluff, a misunderstanding. But then he saw the next document. It was dozens of pages long, the motion for a temporary restraining order. He scanned the text, his eyes catching phrases that made his stomach clench. Irrefutable evidence of adultery, significant risk of dissipation of marital assets, commingling of funds for the purposes of extramarital activities. Attached to the back were the exhibits. Exhibit A, a copy of the flight manifest for the private jet with his name and Emery Caldwell's. Exhibit B, the reservation confirmation for Villa Mail. Exhibit C, a printout of his internet search history. He felt a profound, sickening sense of exposure. She knew everything. It was as if the sun itself recoiled, pulling its warmth from his skin. The world hadn't ended, but it had narrowed to the single moment of horrifying clarity. He was caught. And not just caught, dismantled. Emery, now deeply alarmed, tried to read the papers over his shoulder. Jackson, what is going on? He waved her away, his focus entirely on the final damning document, the judge's order. It was stamped, signed. He read the operative paragraphs, and the world tilted on its axis. It is hereby ordered that all personal and corporate bank accounts, brokerage accounts, and lines of credit listed in Exhibit D, held in the name of Jackson Prescott and/or Camille Vanderbilt Prescott, are hereby frozen. It is further ordered that all assets of Orion Capital LLC are hereby frozen, pending a full accounting of marital funds. Frozen, all of it. The word echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of his mind. His jaw slackened. A tightness seized his chest. It felt like drowning, sinking in warm, shallow water, while the world above carried on unaware. He was sitting in a $50,000 a night villa, a billionaire on paper, and he suddenly didn't have a dollar to his name. His hand trembled as he reached for the last item in the envelope. It was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery, Camille's stationery. He recognized her elegant, precise handwriting. He read the two short, devastating sentences. Jackson, I know about Emery. I know about the baby. Enjoy Maui. Camille. It was the polite, calm civility of the note that shattered him completely. It wasn't the note of a hysterical, heartbroken woman. It was the note of an executioner. Cold. Final. Absolute. He dropped the papers, which scattered across the sun-drenched stone. Even the paper, so crisp and deliberate, seemed to mock him as it slid across the tiles like the whisper of a verdict. He lunged for his phone, his hands shaking so violently he could barely unlock it. He tried to open his banking app. A red banner flashed across the screen. Account access restricted by court order. He tried his corporate account, the same message. He tried his personal Centurion card. Pulled up the app. Card suspended. Panic, cold and suffocating, seized him. He was trapped, stranded in paradise, with his mistress, with no access to the money that defined his entire existence. Orion Capital, his empire, was paralyzed. Payroll was due next week for thousands of employees. His deals, his reputation, everything was about to implode. Jackson? Emery's voice was sharp, panicked. She had picked up the divorce papers. She knows. She knows about the baby. What does this mean? Assets? Frozen? Jackson didn't answer her. He was staring out at the impossibly blue sea. But he didn't see it. He saw only the calm, disappointed face of his wife. The wife. He had underestimated the wife he had dismissed as hormonal and insecure. The quiet, graceful woman who had just brought his entire world crashing down around him with nothing more than a pen and a phone call. The courier, who had been watching the scene unfold with professional detachment, finally spoke. Mr. Prescott, do you acknowledge receipt? Jackson slowly turned his head, his face a mask of disbelief and impotent rage. He felt a primal scream building in his chest, a roar of fury at his own stupidity, at Camille's unexpected treachery. He had come to paradise to celebrate a new beginning, but he had walked directly into the meticulously planned end of his life as he knew it. And the worst part, the part that twisted in his gut like a knife, was the chilling finality of her note. Enjoy Maui. It wasn't just a farewell, it was a curse. The paradise of Villa Mael transformed into a luxurious prison cell almost instantly. The serene bubble of sun, sea, and champagne popped, leaving behind the acrid smell of panic and recrimination. Jackson's first instinct, The instinct of a man used to solving every problem with his checkbook was to fight, to call his lawyers, his bankers, his board members. He stabbed at his phone, dialing his lead attorney at Orion Capital. The call went to voicemail. He tried his personal wealth manager at Goldman Sachs. Voicemail. He soon realized the horrifying scope of Evelyn Grant's strategy. The court order wouldn't have just gone to the banks. It would have gone to his key personnel, advising them that all communication regarding financial matters was to be directed through Grant's office. He was cut off, isolated. Emery, her initial shock curdling into fear, watched him pace the terrace like a caged tiger. The Cartier necklace felt like a cold weight on her skin, now no longer a trophy but a brand. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How are we supposed to pay for this place? How are we getting home?" "Don't you think I'm trying to figure that out?" Jackson snarled, turning on her. The charm he had cultivated was gone, stripped away to reveal the raw, desperate man beneath. "This is your fault." "My fault?" Emery shot back, her dark eyes flashing with anger. "You're the one who was married. You told me she was fragile, that you were going to leave her after the baby was born. You said you had it all under control." "I did have it under control," he roared, "but I underestimated her. I underestimated what she was capable of." Their argument spiraled, the beautiful fantasy of their future dissolving into a bitter blame game. All the while, the sun continued to shine and the waves continued to crash, indifferent to the implosion of their affair. Back in Los Angeles, Camille was the picture of calm control. She sat with Evelyn Grant in the lawyer's obsidian-walled office. Monitoring the fallout, Evelyn Grant's phone had been ringing incessantly. Panicked calls from Orion Capital's board members, from Jackson's army of financial advisors, even from the charter jet company, demanding to know how they would be paid for the return flight from Maui. Evelyn handled each call with surgical precision. "Prescott's assets are under a court-ordered freeze," she would state calmly. "All inquiries are to be directed to my office, in writing. No, I cannot authorize any payments at this time." "He's trapped," Camille said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. "For now," Evelyn cautioned. "Men like your husband are cornered animals. He will get creative. He will find a line of credit. Call in a favor from someone off the books. Our goal wasn't to strand him forever, but to force his hand. He will have to negotiate. And when he does, he'll be negotiating from a position of absolute weakness." The first twist came 2 days later. Jackson, having exhausted all his official channels, made a desperate call to a man he knew from his early, hungrier days, a shadowy private equity magnate named Marcus Thorne, with a reputation for operating in the gray areas of international finance. Jackson begged for a short-term, high-interest loan, just enough to get home and mount a legal defense. Marcus Thorne agreed, but the price was steep. It wasn't just interest he wanted, it was information. He wanted inside knowledge of Orion Capital's proprietary trading algorithms, the crown jewels of Jackson's empire. Cornered and desperate, Jackson agreed. What Jackson didn't know was that Marcus Thorne had a silent partner in his equity firm, a partner who had been feeding him information about Jackson for months, waiting for the perfect moment of vulnerability to strike. That partner was Camille's father, Harrison Vanderbilt. Harrison, a man of immense, quiet power from the world of old money, had always distrusted Jackson. He saw him as a flashy, arrogant upstart who didn't deserve his daughter. When Camille had come to him, not for help, but simply to inform him of her plan, he had put his own chess pieces in motion. He knew Jackson's type. When cornered, he would turn to someone like Thorne. Harrison's investment in Thorne's firm gave him a listening post, right inside Jackson's desperate plea. The call was recorded, providing Evelyn with undeniable proof that Jackson was attempting to sell off corporate secrets, which were also marital assets, in direct violation of the court order. Contempt of court. Evelyn set a predatory gleam in her eye as she listened to the recording. "This is beautiful," Evelyn Grant said. "We can use this to strip him of his control over the company entirely. We can petition the judge to appoint an independent receiver to run Orion Capital." The second, more personal twist came from Emery Caldwell herself. After 2 days of being trapped with a furious, broke Jackson, the fantasy was well and truly over. She saw the man he was without his money, volatile, selfish, and weak. The way he barked orders, the way he blamed everyone but himself. It stripped away every illusion she'd once clung to. The man she had imagined building a future with was nothing but a collapsing facade. Using the villa's Wi-Fi, she did something she should have done months ago. She researched Evelyn Grant. And in her research, she found articles about another of Grant's famous cases, a case involving a faked pregnancy and a fraudulent claim on a wealthy industrialist. A seed of an idea began to form. Emery contacted Evelyn Grant's office directly, requesting a secret meeting. She claimed to have information that would be invaluable to Camille's case. Camille, against Evelyn's initial advice, agreed to a video call. She needed to see the woman who had tried to destroy her life. On the screen, Emery looked pale and diminished, the confident glow completely gone. "Mrs. Prescott, Camille," she began, her voice shaky. "I know you have no reason to believe me, but I am not the monster you think I am. Jackson. He lied to me. He told me your marriage was over, a loveless arrangement. He said you were emotionally unstable." "And you chose to believe him?" Camille asked, her voice like ice. "I was a fool," Emery admitted. "But I'm also pregnant with his child, and now he is ruined, and I am trapped. I want to help you, in exchange for consideration." "What kind of consideration?" Evelyn cut in, her tone sharp. "A settlement," Emery said, finding a sliver of her old confidence. "A trust fund for my child. And in return, I will testify that Jackson was actively planning to defraud you, that this entire Babymoon was a precursor to him hiding assets in offshore accounts, under my name. I have emails. He was careless." Camille looked at the young woman on the screen. She saw the desperation, the calculated self-interest. It was a tempting offer. Emery's testimony would cement their case and utterly ruin Jackson. But something in Camille's gut told her to be cautious. Her motherly instinct was screaming. There was something off. Something too polished, too rehearsed. The kind of performance Camille had seen at countless gala fundraisers. Performances designed to manipulate emotion while hiding the truth. "Emery," Camille said, her voice softening slightly, "before we discuss any deals, I want one thing. A doctor in Maui is going to come to your villa. He will perform an ultrasound. I want to see the image of my husband's child." Emery's face froze. A flicker of pure panic shot through her eyes before she masked it. That's an invasion of my privacy." "It's a condition of any negotiation," Camille stated flatly. "No scan, no deal. You have 1 hour to agree." Camille ended the call. The silence in the room was thick with tension. "You think she's lying?" Evelyn asked. "I think," Camille said, her hand resting on her own rear kicking belly, "that a woman who is truly 5 months pregnant doesn't panic at the thought of an ultrasound." An hour later the call came, not from Emery, but from a frantic Jackson. Marcus Thorne had informed him that their deal was off, that Harrison Vanderbilt was involved, and that he was now facing contempt charges. He was broken. "Camille, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "I'll do anything. I'll give you whatever you want. Just call this off. You've destroyed me. You destroyed us." "You did this," Camille replied, her voice devoid of emotion. There was no satisfaction in her tone, no triumph. Only a hollow finality, like the closing of a vault door. Her heart, once shattered, was no longer fragile. It had been forged into steel. As he continued to plead, an email dinged in Evelyn's inbox. It was from the international courier service they had used. The man who delivered the papers had submitted his final expense report. He noted that upon leaving the villa, he had passed the trash receptacle at the end of the long driveway. Sticking out of the top was the distinctive navy blue Cartier box. He had thought nothing of it, but in light of the high-profile nature of the case, decided to mention it. He also attached a photo from his phone. Evelyn opened the image and turned the screen toward Camille. It showed the empty Cartier box. But lying beside it in the trash was something else. A small silicone prosthetic, the kind used by actresses, or perhaps by a woman trying to convincingly fake a pregnancy bump. It was the final, ugly piece of the puzzle. Emery wasn't pregnant. She had never been pregnant. The search for obstetrics in Maui wasn't for her care. It was likely Jackson researching what a real 5-month pregnancy should look like. The entire affair. The baby, that was the foundation of their new life. It was a complete and utter fraud. A scam designed to entrap a billionaire, and Jackson, in his arrogance and ego, had fallen for it completely. Camille looked at the picture, then back at the skyline. Her husband hadn't just betrayed her for another woman. He had betrayed her for a lie, a cheap, pathetic illusion. She felt no more need to cry. The woman who might have sobbed over this discovery no longer existed. In her place stood someone reborn in clarity and resolve. The rage and grief she had been holding back finally receded, replaced by a profound, almost pitiful sense of clarity. He wasn't a monster. He was a fool. And his empire was crumbling, not because of a grand passion, but because of a grand deception. He had been too blind to see. Her phone buzzed again. It was Jackson, calling for the 10th time. She silenced the call and looked at Evelyn. "It's over," Camille said. "Let's finish this." The end wasn't a fiery explosion, but the quiet, deliberate dismantling of a life. Armed with proof of Jackson's attempted fraud and Emery's deception, Camille held all the cards. The divorce settlement was not a negotiation. It was a surrender. Camille retained the Los Angeles penthouse, the art collection, and a controlling interest in Orion Capital, as stipulated by the Apocalypse Clause in their prenup. She had the board install an interim CEO, a steady hand to guide the company out of the chaos Jackson had created. Jackson was left with a fraction of his former fortune and a reputation shattered beyond repair. Emery Caldwell vanished. Last heard of boarding a flight to Dubai, the fake pregnancy and Cartier necklace her only parting gifts from a life she almost had. She faded from the headlines like a ghost, unmourned and unremembered by the city that once whispered her name. Months later, Camille stood in the nursery of the penthouse. The room was bathed in the soft afternoon light, decorated in serene shades of cream and blue. In her arms she held her son, Daniel Vanderbilt Prescott. He was small, perfect, and blessedly real. His breath was warm against her collarbone, his tiny fist curled around her finger with surprising strength. In him, she felt the grounding force of purpose, the fierce clarity of love untainted by illusion. He had his father's stormy eyes, but Camille hoped he would have her strength, her perception. She looked out at the city, no longer a cage, no longer a battlefield, but simply a view. The skyline that once mirrored her despair now reflected possibility. Every gleam of glass and stretch of steel felt like a quiet affirmation. She had endured. She had risen. It was the backdrop to her new life, a life she had seized from the wreckage of a lie. She was not just a wife, not just a mother. She was the architect of her own future, a matriarch in the making, a woman forged in fire and crowned in survival, proving that the deepest betrayals can sometimes forge the strongest survivors. So the story is over. Our wonderful friends, are you still here until now? If you are, then something about this journey must have touched your heart in some way. And now, you and I, let's take a breath and look at it from a place of realness, of healing, of deep understanding. Camille's story is not just one of betrayal, it's one of rebirth. It's a reminder that even when the world we built crumbles under our feet, we still have the power to rebuild, to rise, to reclaim ourselves. What Jackson tried to destroy wasn't just a marriage, it was a woman's identity. And yet, from the ashes, Camille didn't just survive. She redefined herself. This story teaches us that truth is a weapon, silence can be strategy, and sometimes the greatest power is knowing when to let go. Camille didn't scream, she didn't beg, she built, she planned, and she won. Because she knew who she was, and who she would never allow herself to become. Let this be your reminder. No one gets to write your ending but you. There's a quote from the philosophy of heterodoxism that says, "The wound is where the light enters, but only when we stop worshiping the one who caused it." That's what Camille did. She stopped waiting for Jackson to save her or see her worth. She saw it herself. She chose herself. So if you're standing at the edge of your own heartbreak, I want you to remember this. The pain you feel today can be the foundation of your power tomorrow. Don't just survive. Transform. And if this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of your strength, your value, your right to start over, then like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Someone else out there may need this story just as much as you did. Because healing starts here. With truth. With clarity. With you.